We are in Matthew chapter 26. We stopped at verse 56 last time. So we started with verse 57. What I would like to do is start reading on the thing at 47. I don't want to do the whole chapter again. It's a long chapter. So starting at verse 47, so that way we can ramp in to the end of this chapter over here. It'll be interesting to see how fast we go through chapter 27 when we get to that. I don't think there's quite as much symbology as there is in 26. But 26 is a very long chapter. Yeah, we're gonna start. We're gonna start reading at 47. At 47. Yeah, we're gonna start reading, and then we're gonna start talking about 3 weeks. I know. Especially like in the Old Testament when we're like blasting 3 chapters at a time. Like it's funny, but that's kind of the way the Gospels are. Let's see here. It's why we have 4 of them, and they're pretty crazy. So, all right. So let's share this. And yep. All right. Oh, went back to 47 now. Look at that. Yeah, that's where you want.
And while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now his betrayer had given them a sign.
Whomever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him.
Immediately he went up to Jesus.
Greetings, Rabbi.
And kissed him.
Friend, why have you come?
Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And suddenly one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest, and cut off his ear.
Put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels? How then could the scriptures be fulfilled, that it must happen thus?
In that hour, Jesus said to the multitudes,
Have you come out as against a robber, with swords and clubs to take me? I sat daily with you, teaching in the temple, and you did not seize me. But all this was done, that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled.
Then all the disciples forsook him and fled, and those who had laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance to the high priest's courtyard, and he went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at last 2 false witnesses came forward.
This fellow said, I'm able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days.
And the high priest arose and said to him,
Do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you?
But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest answered and said to him,
I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God.
It is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven.
Then the high priest tore his clothes.
He has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? Look, now you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think?
He is deserving of death.
Then they spat in his face and beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands.
Prophesy to us, Christ. Who is the one who struck you?
Now Peter sat outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him,
You also were with Jesus of Galilee.
but he denied it before them all.
I do not know what you are saying.
And when he had gone out to the gateway, another girl saw him and said to those who were there.
This fellow also was with Jesus of Nazareth.
But again he denied with an oath.
I do not know the man.
And a little later those who stood by came up and said to Peter,
Surely you also are one of them, for your speech betrays you.
Then he began to curse and swear.
I do not know the man.
And Peter remembered the word of Jesus.
Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times.
So he went out and wept bitterly.
I'll let you guys get some of the weeping that time. Okay, so we're kind of ramping in from the betrayal and the arrest into what we're talking about in 57. So that kind of 57 through 61 or something like that. Like this kind of section. What kind of stood out to you? And if we need to go back a little bit, we can do that too. But what kind of stood out in this first little bit? Anything?
This is something that has bothered me always. Did Judas betray him for the money? Or was Judas trying to put him in a position where he would have no choice but to exert his power?
That's interesting.
So, all right, let me see if I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that Judas maybe believed that Jesus is Judas Maccabeus, the true Messiah, and that Judas wanted him to fight, to be the hammer, to start knocking heads and start the revolution. Is that what you're talking about? Okay, I've never looked at it that way.
Did you ever see Jesus Christ Superstar?
Oh, it's been a very long time since I've seen that. Is that why Judas does it?
That's how that was the first time that thought came to my mind when they portrayed it like that. I said, that's an interesting point.
It is an interesting. I don't know if that is interesting. I don't know if there's anything else that points to that, but there could be, because you have that is an interesting point. Daniel Lee, and what makes it interesting is that the disciples are all pointing to where they want Jesus to be this revolutionary. They want him to be this one who's going to be, the king like David, or at least in their view, king like David. And everyone is yelling for him with the same chants of 100 years before of Hosanna, save us, when Judas Maccabeus was riding into Jerusalem. They all want this, and is at the cues and how that actually has a valid reading to it. That's
except that you hear Jesus say that he has to die. He tells us that before this time. He tells us that he's going to be killed, and it has to be. And he tells Judas that he has to do this for the fulfillment of the promise.
Yeah.
So it seems like, it may be that, we know the disciples are kind of.
Yeah.
But it seems like Jesus knows that it's not that way, and he's told them that it's not that way. he's not going to be an earthly king, that he's not going to
Yeah.
create.
Like he's told them that, but they think he's going to be that to like bitter end.
I agree that, but just before this scene, he's talking to them and he says that he will be betrayed. And it has to be with a lot of the scriptures.
And it doesn't say it's Peter that picks up the sword, but like we have the empty husk of what I think what is going on there when it talks to you about Mary Magdalene, not Mary, but the woman, with that, and we have the empty sword where all that stuff. I think I'm getting stronger and stronger in this feeling that like we're really meant to see ourselves like through this story, and like what makes me fascinated about that view of Judas is that is a line that we often take in all these things. That it's not just a sheer, it is a betrayal for money, but it's also, we often betray Jesus for just power.
Like convenience.
Yeah. Like that's, because I mean, you don't have to look far to see our politicians using Jesus to be an opioid for the masses so that we could give them power. Like that's, we don't have to look far to see that. And it's almost like Judas is doing the same. That's interesting. I mean, I don't know if it's, I've never thought of it.
Zacharias said he would be betrayed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, that's still a betrayal. It's not like, it's still a betrayal because it's to Vance's point, Jesus is talking about like, this is not how I want it done at all. And like, if Lee is correct, then Judas is going, despite everything the master is saying, I am going to accomplish that. Like that's.
Was it really that much into the money? Because the minute it happened, he threw it back at him. And
yeah.
So maybe that was his motive.
Yeah, you're throwing the money back like that. And so did we read that in this? Did we miss that?
I think I'm later.
That's comfort.
Okay.
After that, he does that.
So yeah. And that's, that could be some of it too. So
it says that Judas hangs himself. He throws the money back and hangs himself after he saw what they had done to Jesus.
Yeah.
So it would support Lee's argument that
he didn't the way he thought it was going to.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. Yeah. No, I hadn't thought about that.
I mean, that's a plot. It's either for the money or.
Well, like what we're saying, like what Lee is saying is that so there's this line going through the Gospels that the disciples are following Jesus and the people are following Jesus because they think that he's the Messiah, which is correct. But their view of the Messiah in their head is that he's going to come kick Rome out of occupation of Jerusalem and of Israel, kick them out, and that Jesus is going to be this all-powerful kind of earthly king, kind of like King David or something like that. Whereas Jesus has this sense of like removing power to save everyone from sin, death, and the grave. Like that's where Jesus willingly foregoes all those pursuits of like worldly power to go over. And what Lee is saying, so the typical view of Judas is that he did it because he loves that money, loves that grain, loves that jingle jangle, right? Like that's and all that stuff. But what Lee said is a little bit deeper of a thing, where what Judas was actually doing is betraying Jesus, because Jesus says he doesn't want to go this. He's willingly going to go die. And Judas is trying to cause an interaction with the powers so that the revolution will start. It's so that the war will start and Jesus will be risen up. the thing is with all of this, it's all circumstantial. Like that's, and like you can't get past circumstantial on all of this. And so, whenever circumstantial things like that, we have to be, we got to be a little careful with it. But that's fascinating. That's fascinating.
We would just have to ask Judas when we get up there.
Yeah. I like that point of view there. I like that point of view. Right, like that.
I don't want to vote for somebody.
Yeah.
First of all, it's Judas.
Yeah. Like that was good. That was good. They so Peter followed at a distance, which I think is interesting there. It's kind of Peter is following, but he's farther and farther away. Like that's interesting language, I think, going on there. And then I want to talk about the false testimony stuff. Like that's because I wrote down some notes on that. This really stuck out to me at the beginning of the trial. Like what, and so I want to talk about it for what did you guys notice about that?
I couldn't find any witnesses.
Yeah.
That's what, that stuck out. The first time we read this a few weeks ago, that stuck out to me like a sore thumb. They couldn't find any witnesses. Does anyone else have anything?
But they called them false witnesses, but they couldn't find any witnesses.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Which is it? Well,
Yeah.
it says, but they did not find any, though many false witnesses came forward. And then finally, two came forward and declared they finally found two people who were lying to,
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
I guess the tearing down of the temple was the final straw.
Yeah. Well, and what Jesus says to Caiaphas here in a little bit is so loaded. We'll talk about that. It's so much fun. And there's a reason why Caiaphas loses his composure. And so they couldn't find anyone. And then they finally found all these people. And there's all these other false witnesses, which to me says is that they're trying to what's the official terms when you're just trying to get witnesses to do your side?
Leading.
What?
Leading witness?
Yeah, leading. We're finding witnesses to say whatever they want to say. Is that what that is? Leading.
Perjury.
Perjury.
Yes, perjury.
Yeah, perjury. Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, it would be perjury too, but they're
all of these nice things you were talking about. Yes.
But perjury. I'm just looking for the legal terms. I'm using you as a resource.
That's being used.
Like a book, and so that's.
Yeah, give me the sense.
Do I need to look it up on Google?
No.
Yeah. Anyway, so
I wonder when he said they couldn't find any credible witnesses, it says that they couldn't find any, though many false witnesses. I wonder if it's just who was testifying also, because only certain people could be considered credible witnesses.
Yeah.
So there were people, but they couldn't count. They couldn't allow that testimony to be used
for whatever reason.
I mean, geez, you and your lawyer, I guess.
Yeah.
No, I'm not the lawyer.
Yeah. But it's fascinating, and then what I think is good about the way this is written is at least I read it and I'm going, this is kind of a sham trial. That's definitely the feeling that the author here is trying to get across, I believe. And so that's kind of fascinating. And then let's see here. And he's like, and the high priest rose up again. It's like, do you answer nothing that these men would testify against you? Jesus kept silent. And what I thought was funny, that he's like, look, at these two are testifying against you. And it's like, well, what happened to the other ones that weren't saying anything? They weren't saying anything about it.
They were probably saying silly things.
Yeah. So
he walks on water.
Yeah. And so he says to Jesus, I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. They obviously want him dead right here and all that. So then Jesus says this. it is as you say, nevertheless I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power, coming on the cloud of heaven. Now, when I used to read that, and then like the high priest ripping his clothes, it seemed like the saying did not deserve the reaction. You know, like that's the how does that sit with everyone else? Why I look up Jesus' quotes.
The tradition was that if a family member passed away, you would rip your clothes.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
And
Also, if someone left the family or Judaism, if they tore their clothes, that means you were dead to them.
yeah.
like my Uncle Abraham.
Abraham. Yeah. They
buried a casket, put a gravestone up with his name and the date of his wedding to my aunt as his date of death.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's a curious story.
Yeah.
Almost as good as judges.
Yeah. They let's see here. Let's see. Okay, so Jesus is quoting from Daniel 7. That's what he's quoting. And Mark found this. And we think like this is cool. So when you go back into chapter 7, he's quoting, I think, 13 is what my Bible says. But I'm going to read a little bit before that. There's about these 4 beasts. And so chapter 7, verse 1 starts like this. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and a vision in his head while in bed, and he wrote down the dream telling the main facts. And so he sees these 4 beasts. And the last beast, he goes, after this I saw night visions, behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong, huge iron teeth, it was devouring, breaking pieces, trampling with residue with its, too many pages there, feet, and it was different from all the other beasts that were before it. It had 10 horns. Mark and I refer to that as the horny beast. And I was considering the horns, and there was another horn and a little one coming up out of them. Before it came, 3 of the first horns were plucked out of the roots. And there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking pompous words. I watched till thrones were put up into place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow. Like all these things, it's like talking here. And verse 11, I watched then because the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain and its body destroyed and given to the burning flame. For as the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for the reason and time. And then here's the verse. And I was watching on the night visions, and behold, one like a son of man coming from the clouds of heaven came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him to hear before him. So this arrogant speaking, horny beast, this beast with all these horns, who's saying all these things about the destruction and all this stuff, and it follows in that verse 13, I'm watching a vision. Everybody, especially religious leaders of that day, would have known this passage. And just like today, like everyone likes to talk about the politician that they don't like, they're like, here's the signs of the times and all of this stuff. They're probably ascribing all these people to these different signs. It's like, who is this beast with all the horns and all that stuff? So when Jesus is quoting that, what is going on? And everyone will realize, and this is why the chief priest gets so upset. Jesus is calling the chief priest that beast with all the horns. Like that is what he is doing. And he knows exactly, like he's basically calling him the devil. You know, like that's is like, you are everything wrong with all of this stuff. Like you are the one. And so so by calling him that beast with all the horns, and he's like, you've heard him. He speaks blasphemy. You know, what further need do you have of these witnesses? Look, you've heard the blasphemy. What do you think? He's calling the chief priest, like the beast with all the horns. It's hard for me not to say the other way because that's all Mark and I call him. And so I don't know what you guys are laughing at.
I found a note here too, going back a second or two.
Yeah.
It says that a practice Judaism prescribed when one hears blasphemy, the punishment for blasphemy was death.
Okay, yeah.
So that would be another reason to tear clothes.
Yeah. So so he's, here in front of God and everybody, is calling this guy one of the worst things in the Old Testament.
Kind of like us calling somebody a 666.
Yeah. It's like it's kind of that same idea, and he's just like, you've heard it, and they all answered. Let's see, this is the end of verse 66, and they answered and said, he's deserving of death. Then they spat on his face, beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands, which struck. What does the NIV say there? The struck him with the palms of their hands. The NIV or ESV, another English translation.
Slapped.
Slapped. Okay, so it says slap. Like that's which
in his face and struck him.
Like this great.
Smokes.
And some.
Yeah.
You had to look that up in the dictionary.
Yeah.
No, you do us word bubbles.
And so they, but like a slap is way more degrading than a punch. Like that's kind of, Jesus references this, and this is why I think it's good writing here. When Jesus says, turn your other cheek, the whole thinking behind that is that they, when you turn the other cheek, that the first one was a slap. And by turning the other cheek, they can't slap you again. It forces them that they have to punch you like an eagle. Like that's the feeling behind the turn the other cheek. And so suddenly you see them all slapping Jesus.
Crispus says, and some slash.
Yeah.
Not all.
Yeah. And then it says, and we get into, like, he was just accused of blasphemy. And so now we see another one that says, they're like, prophesy to us, Christ, who's the one that struck? And you see like some actual blasphemy then going on. The perpetrators of all of this pain are kind of the ones doing it. I don't know. Well, what are your guys' thoughts on that? What do you think? If you want to find more about that beast with all the horns on it, go back. I think it's 2019. We did a Daniel sermon series, and that's when Mark figured out that Jesus was telling Caiaphas that he was that. And I remember we were like, whoa! like that's, it's like, no wonder. And so.
Was this an epiphany, or did you do some research?
Yeah, we just did research, but like suddenly you do research and you make that's a huge connection. Mm-hmm. Because like every time I always read this in the past, like, okay, like quoted an Old Testament thing, and Caiaphas gets upset. Or it's not Caiaphas, it's not high priest. Yeah, unnamed. These people that are unnamed. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Like so going off of Ed's hypothesis of the unnamed things, like think about what they say. So they slap and it's like, who struck you?
Well, Mark says that they were blindfolded. and then struck him.
Yeah.
This one, when you read it in Matthew, wonder, well, couldn't he just see who struck him? What the cross?
Yeah.
Mark did he struck? Thank you for the book lesson.
Oh, which one?
Before it's not the gospel.
Oh yeah. You're even yeah. The that's good.
I brought it back.
Oh, did you?
You can only read so much.
I could tell I was missing. and so we have that with the struck, and then we have Peter, and we have Peter denied. What stands out to you in this? And you could even the obvious stuff you can mention.
No charcoal.
No charcoal fire in this one. That's John. John is and that's the strong thing in John. John is around that charcoal fire.
It's interesting that none of the other disciples are mentioned. They don't follow him. They aren't reported as being anywhere near him.
Well, they all ran away.
Well, exactly. But Peter is the only one who's, I realize he denies him 3 times, but he's the only one.
He's the only one that's there to deny.
He's the only one.
Peter is us.
Yeah. No, I believe that so strongly, like that Peter, and that's that through line that we've been talking about for this chapter, is that, they're all with them, but they're all I think we're to see ourselves in all these disciples, and especially Peter, that we all deny and kind of leave them alone,
But Peter being us being Peter, is also interesting in that he wants to be with him, but he denies it when pressed.
Yeah.
And we fall in the same categories.
Mm-hmm.
We profess one thing in church, but push come to shove, we oftentimes deny or at least avoid discussing that issue.
Yeah. Like we don't want to deal.
Yeah. But Peter's in the same boat, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Well, at least I am. I can't speak for everybody.
And so that's what else is anyone else out on here? Like this is something that's so well known. It's good to look at it again, with kind of renewed eyes. Is there anything standing out to you in all this?
There are little things that I thought were interesting. They talked about his voice, his accent giving him away, and I think that's interesting that they would comment about it. And then it makes you wonder, what are the accents in the Middle East? We have a Southern accent.
Yeah.
It just made me something. It has no bearing on the story to me, so I don't know why it's there.
Well, yeah.
Well, other than to reference that you must have known him because he was in the same area.
We should start a little conspiracy that Jesus was forcing everyone to talk a certain way. That's not did you sound like Jesus? We'll sell a Bible study. We'll sell a Bible study. We'll make millions.
I know people in the district now.
Yeah. Base it all off of this verse. This verse. Jesus had a special accent. You should too. And then we can come up with that accent. Is there anything else?
Peter just doesn't deny it. It says he begins to invoke a curse on himself and swear.
Yeah.
Which Jesus had previously told him that's a no-no.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like it's not that he just denied. Yeah, like you said, it's not just that he fully clothes himself.
Why he denying?
It's like why he denies him.
Maybe he doesn't want to be put up on a cross too.
Yeah.
Entire system is guilt by association.
Yeah. Guilt by association. Yeah. Be put on a cross too. He could be charged as guilty.
Yeah. You really believe what Jesus is saying?
And I think that's
You want to go forward and try to impress other people with it.
And that's what I like about that that through line where we can attach ourselves to Jesus and like we see, and there's all these different ways that we see denying from denying for money with Judas, and with Lee's way, denying to uphold the religious order that you want in this world. Like denying, like the rest of the disciples just run away because they're scared, and denying, like Peter, just because like life depends on it. It's it seems, and that's and I'm trying to express this as strongly as I can. This gets us to a point where all these people who shouldn't have denied, yet Jesus saves them. We get to the end of this, and that is like the genesis of the good news of the gospel. That, notice this book, like, if they were trying to start a movement that was based around Peter or the other disciples, they wouldn't have them running away scared. Like this Christianity is starting its movement in the powers of the world on its heels, where they're all blown away by this coming resurrection and all this stuff. Like, does that make sense? What I'm kind of saying, like, it's getting where I think we're all like to see ourselves like, oh yeah, like that's me.
Which will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Why crucify him? Just bring what he said or what she said about him.
Yeah, believe me. Because like you read these things and you're just like, but then you like allow yourself to get a little introspective, and you're like, I've not always been who I wanted to be. Like what all the things that we confess in the classic confession or the confession we have now. I don't. It's all the things we say. Like I've taken these things out. Yeah, and I think we see that Jesus saves us from the midst of our sin, not when we're being holy.
No,
you want to say something?
I keep hearing in my head a hymn from the Easter season or the Holy Week, actually, where the bottom line is, I crucified him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Ah, holy Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who really crucified him?
Well, I think
it's because of our actions.
Yeah.
When we do things and deny him, that the hymn writer is saying, it's me.
Yeah.
It's all the things that I did that are bad.
I think
I'm Judas. I crucified him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what 26 is about. Like, is that it's that through line to where Jesus is left alone. And yes, the Romans did it, but
but he didn't do that. The high priest did it.
Yeah, the high priest and this the next chapter we're right to get into. We're going to see the actual deed and all of that stuff. So let's go ahead and get into it. Like let's do 27. Let's see how far we get it. We're actually going into a new chapter. Like that's.
Yeah, we got 15 minutes.
Yeah. I figured that was what was going to happen. Yeah. Let's see. And 27 is not as long. Let's see. 7, almost. Still 66 verses.
Yeah. You just went through several modules.
Let's see here. Maybe
several pages.
Maybe we'll go to. Maybe we'll go to verse 31. Maybe we'll go to verse 30.
Yeah, that's a good spot.
Yeah, let's go to verse 31 for today. We'll do the whole chapter next week.
When morning came, all the chief priests and elders of the people plotted against Jesus to put him to death. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor. Then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that he had been condemned, was remorseful, and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders.
I have sinned by betraying innocent blood.
What is that to us? You see to it.
Then he threw down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed, and went and hanged himself. But the chief priests took the silver pieces.
It is not lawful to put them into the treasury, because they are the price of blood.
And they consulted together and bought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. Therefore that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet.
And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the value of him who was priced, whom they of the children of Israel priced, and gave them for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me.
Now Jesus stood before the governor.
Are you the king of the Jews? It is as you say.
And while he was being accused by the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing.
Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?
But he answered him not one word, so that the governor marveled greatly. Now at the feast the governor was accustomed to releasing to the multitude one prisoner whom they wished. And at that time they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them,
Whom do you want me to release to you? Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?
For he knew that they had handed him over because of envy. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife said to him,
Have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him.
But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus.
Which of the two do you want me to release to you?
Barabbas!
What then shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?
Let him be crucified!
Why? What evil has he done?
But they cried out all the more.
Let him be crucified!
When Pilate saw that he could not prevail at all, but rather that a tumult was rising, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude.
I am innocent of the blood of this just person. You see to it.
And all the people answered,
His blood be on us,
Be on us
and our
on our children!
Yeah.
Then he released Barabbas to them. And when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole garrison around him. And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. When they had twisted a crown of thorns, they put it on his head, and a reed in his right hand. And they bowed the knee before him and mocked him.
Hail, King of the Jews!
Then they spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they took the robe off him, put his own clothes on him, and led him away to be crucified. Now as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bury.
All right, that's right. Wake up. It was so boring. I wasn't paying any attention. Yes.
All stuff with Cardi.
Yeah. All stuff. Every Good Friday. This is like it's. I really like the Barabbas narrative. Let's get to it. So, well, yeah, let's say like right before Judas hangs himself and Judas hanging himself, there, I'm seeing a through line through this, but we'll see. I want to see where you guys are going. What do you think?
I haven't got a through line. I just, two things caught my attention.
Yeah.
One is the matter of repentance. And I'm looking at it and listening to this, and the Bible says he regretted betraying. That's not enough. And that raised another issue, more contemporary, and that is what has become the ubiquity of sorry, the word sorry. Sorry is a balm for negligence or rudeness or for indifference, and it has become nothing. It's been stripped of its importance. You'll be on a call with somebody who lost your reservation. I'm sorry. Or you made a reservation, I can't find it. And perhaps I'm going into the weeds too much or down a wrong rabbit hole, but it's a contemporary reminder of what you have to do in order to acquire grace. It's not enough to say, I'm sorry. It's not enough for Judas to say, gee, I regret this. That was the first thing that struck me. And another was the irony of the high priests suddenly having scruples about how money is to be used. They're the source of the blood money.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who start this process. And now they're going to do something eleemosynary. They're going to build a potter's field. Isn't that swell? That's my story, and I'm sticking.
That's your story?
Oh, yeah. There's something else. In the text, there is, at least in the Lutheran Study Bible, there is an exoneration of Jews. And I'm wondering whether this exoneration exists because it says, it is only the bad Jews in the temple. It makes the point in the study notes. The powerful Jews, but not Jews in general. And that's wonderful. I am of an age when the received wisdom in the 1950s was Jews were Christ killers. So I'm wondering what happened to this? When did it suddenly become appropriate to exonerate the Jews?
It's so I think the through line that we kind of connected to in the last chapter, this is my opinion about that, and I think it needs to be addressed pretty quick, is that we're meant to see ourselves in this. And so my through line and all this stuff is like, it's pretty dogmatic when you have like, well, what do you want me to do with the Christ? And the crowd yells, crucify him. And that crowd would have been a crowd of Jews then. But I don't think we're to look at those people as them. I think we're to look at those people yelling, crucify him, as us. And I don't like, now I do think there is a distinction. I didn't read the notes down there. Mm-hmm. I do think there is a distinction between the powerful leaders of those days and how they are peacocking around doing what they want. But I do think the gospel is written in such a way that we can't weasel out of this. You know, that their cry for crucify him is our cry. Like that's like over there. And I think people that try to make a distinction between those two, I'll be a little bombastic here, have an ulterior motive in wanting separation between a group of people from another. And I don't think the gospel is saying that. I think followers of Christ can see their own prize for crucifying there. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Like that's the.
I don't get it.
You don't get it.
I don't understand what you're trying to say. Are you trying to say that you? I don't know what you're saying.
Okay, so I'm getting a little ahead, but it's there have been people who want to blame the Jews for the crucifixion.
Right.
You know, like over there, and that is easy to do. But I think the way that the gospel is written is that we are to see ourselves in that. It's not blaming it on this group of people in this time, that it's more global than that. And so like that we're not to be just like, oh, those people are the evil one in this situation. And we're like risen ourselves above it. And we're like, if only I was there, you know, like that's what I'm saying. Does that make a little more sense now? Yeah. So like that's, and the reason why is that there's two sides of this coin, and why I'm going ahead and addressing this. There is some anti-Semitism that comes from the separating out like that. And normally that's convenient. They're not anti-Semitic because of this story over here. They're anti-Semitic for other reasons, and they use this story as a proof text to that. But there's also people who will say things that, like, I am anti-Semitic because of all of this, and that's just not true. And all these things, like, we are to see ourselves in the shoes of God's people here, like that these are our calls as well. Because I think, going back to Ed's point of the faceless people, of the nameless people in the book, that it keeps on compounding with those nameless people. And I think that's kind of a call for us to invite ourselves in. After all, Matthew, you know, Levi, tax collector, outsider anyway, writing about all this stuff. And so I don't think it's blaming. I think it's we're meant to read this with sadness and not retribution. Like, because I don't know if that makes any sense. I go over there. And so I don't know why they make a distinction in there.
Let me read it.
Okay.
If Pilate hesitates to accept responsibility for his role in Christ's death, the mob does not. However, this is a mob of temple partisans, not a representative sample of the Jewish people. The temple crowd bears the responsibility, not all Jews. Rather than simply blaming the Jews, the apostles proclaimed the gospel to them, even to those who call for Jesus' death. So again, this is perhaps my word exoneration is not appropriate.
Yeah.
It's my has made a point of saying
that was my point.
Don't generalize.
Before we started this morning, when I texted in, the crowd mentality, the elders fired up the crowd. They asked for Barabbas, they asked to crucify, and was that word regretted in the New King James?
Oh, with Judas?
All the way back here, Judas. Verse 3.
Verse 3, I have remorseful in mind.
I have repented.
But mine is even more bad. He changed his mind.
Which that's repent, like, so.
This
all right. I want to look up a couple of words.
Yeah, because you used the word regretted earlier. And that would kind of play into what Lee said, where he was trying to get him to be the king, but he blew it.
Filled with regret.
Yeah.
Pam, want to say something?
Pam, did you want to say something, or you just read it?
I'm just kind of looking back.
Okay, yeah.
Talking about.
Yeah. So it's all right. I'm looking up some Greek. So here, I'll put it up on the screen. All right, let's see here. We'll go to this.
The proper terminology is this button.
Actually, I did it wrong. Share it again. I did it wrong.
No, that's not possible.
No.
So I'd encourage him.
Okay. So let's see. Let's get it on the screen. Come on, there we go. All right. So what we have, so we have then having seen Judas, the one having delivered up him, that he was condemned, he regretted. So that's yes. So that is this word. What is this? Resources. So let's see what this word is. So,
oh yeah, I see it. I can pronounce that.
yeah. Well, it's connected to metanoia, which is repentance, and so
that's a new word. No.
Yeah. We're looking at the original words here. So it's so you see this specific instance only occurs these few times here. So let me go back and look at the actual Strong's number. And let's see here. And so, so you have this is the same word that's used when Paul says, I do not regret. I do not regret. Like that's, I will not change his mind, will not repent. Like that's, so it has, so regret and repent are being used in as strong synonyms, and I think this is something like that is something that, as we repent from things, that kind of shows us, kind of what's happening there. And
I just think it's, regret is kind of, oh yeah, I'm sorry. I messed up. Yeah.
I think it's stronger than that.
I pushed the orange soda instead of the Coca-Cola for you.
I regret my decision.
I regret my doing that.
It's like drinking milk on a hot day.
Repent to me is a strong word. Repent.
Yeah. and so you see what he says in 4. I have sinned by betraying innocent blood.
Yeah.
And so, and this is like, I kind of like in this study, this is going to be a weird thing to say, like softened on my stance on Judas as we're kind of looking through it here.
That was my visceral, that the severe condemnation is tempered somewhat now.
But especially seeing that through line, I don't know if that's a good thing, but that we're supposed to see ourselves in that, and that Jesus is, in his death, he's saving all of this. Like he's even saving from the calls of his own crucifixion. Like that is also a betrayal. I could be wrong about this. I don't agree with their saying the temple people are different from the people crying, Hosanna, Hosanna, going into Jerusalem. I don't see that distinction in the gospel. Like, I think you can really look and find that distinction, but I don't think, I don't see you begin Holy Week with cries one way and you end Holy Week with cries another way. And I think you have a through line there that leads us all down that path. Like that's how I see it. Now I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, but again, we're now talking logically, not spiritually.
Yeah.
You prefer the end point being it's us.
Yes.
And so you interpret it.
I am interpreting it.
And by doing so, perhaps you marginalize it's the bad priests.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. You're hanging on to this because it makes theological sense to you, spiritual sense to you. And someone just shows up yesterday and says, oh, the bad guys were priests, not all the Jews.
Yeah. So without that note, here's my question then. Without that note, would you have gotten there? That's my point. That's my point. And the notes could be really helpful, but I don't think you would have gotten there without that note.
Shame on me for going into
No, this is all good stuff. This all is gonna we're gonna be naming names when we do the sermon on this. They like that's no,
Be ready to stand up.
That's great. That's great things.
Pastor?
Yeah.
But wasn't the Catholic Church's attitude at the time that it was all the Jews?
Oh yeah.
Was infected.
Yeah.
John Paul II, when I'm a little boy, having a glancing association with the church on it's the Jews who killed Christ.
Well, and what Lee is saying is that it wasn't the temple Jews, that it was all the Jews.
Right.
Yeah. The Second Vatican Council in 1965 was the first time they said, the Pope came out and said, no, it's not, we can't blame the Jews anymore.
Yeah. So.
The high priests and the Pharisees have all been after Jesus forever since he first opened his mouth and started saying sermons.
If I'm not mistaken, and I could be, because the Catholic Church in general blamed the Jews, Luther initially was anti-Semitic in that sense also.
Oh yeah, he was, man. Especially at the end of his life when he became a cranky old man.
Well, actually it becomes less.
Again, autobiographically, initially Luther uses the Jews as an exemplar to proper faith. It's only when he realized that they're not going to convert that he became. I don't know whether it was repressed anti-Semitism, it probably burst forth, but at least I saw a little sliver of admiration for Jews.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and you also have to remember that the six of us plotting here, we are products of our day. We just are. And so is Luther. 6 of us. How many of us are?
Well, there's 8.
8, man.
8. If you count it down.
Listen, my other hand was underneath the paper. I didn't see it. Yeah. Like so those of us we're all products of our times. Like that's and Luther was too. And that's not to excuse all those things. It's just sometimes we look at that. So here's my point. All right. We're not too there in the reading and all that stuff. But if this is true, if Matthew, here's my point in all of this stuff. If Matthew wants us to see the Jews who are crying crucified, there's going to be a cataclysmic event in the story that's going to connect us and them, right? The cataclysmic event is there, and it's only in Matthew, okay? It's chapter 27. It's verse 51, but we'll start reading in verse 49. This is after Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me? He goes, they're like, leave him alone. Let him see if Elijah will come and save him. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice, and he yielded up his spirit. And behold, the veil in the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quakes, the rocks were split, graves were opened, many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised, and coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared. Like that rending of the temple, I think, is that moment where that distinction between Jews and Gentiles was done away with in the midst of Christ's death. Like God was on the loose. Like his spirit, which was, was the connecting point between God's kingdom and our kingdom, was the midst of that temple. And when Jesus died, and like over there, God's spirit is on the loose. And so like that's, this again, me as I'm crafting a story here, but like the way the story is working out, is that way, like going through that. And I could and this is why I like when this is really good that we're like these entrenched ideas, like challenging them and doing that stuff is good. Is good.
Comments.
Yeah.
There were just kind of an aside comments. First, I find it fascinating that Pilate's wife has a dream about this, and it's important enough to be in this passage. And then second of all, from a Jewish perspective, something I watched a long time ago, he was a Jewish archaeologist and talked about, in Israel, the Jewish people wash their hands even before they would go into a restaurant or whatever. That was a Jewish action or whatever. And he made comment to this passage, verse 24, why would Pilate wash his hands? Pilate wasn't Jewish, that's a Jewish custom. And it always kind of made me wonder, whether Matthew just put that in there so people would understand Pilate was kind of washing his hands of the whole thing finally, or, that I found interesting because I hadn't known that was a custom amongst Jews.
Yeah.
Matthew's they said, Levi?
Yeah, the tax collector.
So he's a bona fide Jew.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he was a Jew. But he was working for the enemy.
I understand. I'm getting back to washing hands. Among other instances, when you pay your respects, you sit Shiva, it's called, when someone has died. Before you enter, you wash your hands. There's a bowl and a little thing involved as well.
Indians wash their hands too before they eat.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah. So
we're supposed to.
The Christensen's code. And but so the one thing I want to point out, and we'll be done here. Let's talk about all this stuff again in 27 next week as we begin here. We can just beat down a little bit more. There's two things going on here that I want you guys to think about before we meet again. Is the dreams that Pilate's wife is having, and Pilate's not wanting to do this. The world knows the truth that God's people do not know. Like that's that over there. Like that's. I think there's. I think
say that again.
The terrible outside world knows the truth, when God's own people are blinded to it. I think we still see that to this day. And I think that goes back to the whole rocks will cry out thing, And then also, I thought of when they were yelling, "Hail, King of the Jews," that they are saying who Jesus was. And it reminded me of that phrase, "God is not mocked." That they are declaring truth, even though they're trying to do it in a mocking way. Like that. So think about those. I want to get those out. I don't want to forget them for next week. So think about.
I remember.
Well, no, I have them written down. But I just wanted to put them in your mind.
So how are you going to forget them then?
Yeah. So good study again today. This is a good one, and all that stuff, and
got through almost 30 verses.
Yeah. Wow. I know. And so we'll continue with next week for everyone watching on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. So do we have any